Pirates: The Legend of the Black Cat is an action-adventure game developed by Westwood Studios and published by EA for the PlayStation 2 and Xbox in February of 2002. Reviews for this game were pretty good at the time, scoring 6 to 8 out of 10 from most of the big gaming websites and magazines. Taking place in 1762, this title opens up with our main protagonist, Katerina de Leon, who is of course a pirate, discovering that her home and her father are being attacked as she's returning home from her journey out at sea. Katerina's father is locked in a sword battle to the death with the evil Captain Hook, and he loses, but just before he bleeds out he has time to write a full side of A4 to leave behind so his daughter can learn the truth and avenge his death. Apparently her mother was a pirate, but he never told her out of fear she'd follow the same path. But Katerina is clearly a pirate already, so great parenting there, I guess. Anyway, Katerina's mother was also a really famous pirate, so she immediately jumps back on her ship and sets sail for an adventure of discovering more about her family's past and begins the hunt for the man who killed her father. It is a pretty simple premise, to be honest, but boy does this story take some weird turns towards the tail end of its narrative, and every single cutscene and bit of voice acting that unveils more of the story is delivered incredibly poorly but perfect at the same time. This game is special, and as you can probably tell, I don't mean in the "it's a magnificent gaming achievement" kind of way, but more this game is bad, but it's also great. I picked this game up in a charity shop for 50p, and I don't regret it one bit, because I'm so glad I got to experience whatever this thing is. So, let's talk gameplay. What do you do in Pirates: Legend of the Black Cat? Good question. Well, you pretty much just sail around a bunch of islands populated with pirates, giant crabs, skeletons, and gorillas for some reason. It almost plays slightly like a budget Wind Waker, going from one island to the next, hacking and slashing your way through enemies, picking up fetch quests and collectibles, and working your way through to unlocking new areas to travel to. But how's the combat, I hear you ask? Another good question. The combat is boring. For the most part, you just mash one button and let Kat swing her sword at whatever is in front of her as she repeats the same animation again and again. There are a few items added in to mix things up a little. You can block and parry, but the AI isn't really smart enough to warrant such complex tactics, and you also have an access to other items such as throwing knives and dynamite, which do come in handy against some of the boss type characters. On top of this, you can also pull out a special attack once your meter is filled up, which does a good job evening the odds when you're surrounded, but most enemies go down in 2 or 3 hits, so while you won't be left frustrated by its combat, you shouldn't expect any great depth either. But it's a pirate game, I hear you say. Surely the ship battles are decent. And I would like to tell you that they are, but sadly, they are possibly less exciting than the action on foot. If you get into any fights while sailing the seas, you need to position your boat alongside an enemies and let loose with your cannons. The problem with this, and this applies to the game in general, is that the camera is the biggest threat to your safety than any of the ships are. It tends to position itself in the most awkward angle possible, and even when you try to correct it manually, it just swings a little bit too far almost every time, meaning you're trying to correct your view, and when you finally get it right, your ship is no longer in the right position to attack. Your method of attack on the ship is similar to combat on foot. You have a repetitive attack mapped to one button, a special attack that runs on a meter, and to add a little variety to your arsenal, you can launch gas bombs and fire bombs at enemy ships. Fortunately, the ship combat is very forgiving, meaning you only need to be aiming in the general direction to get a hit. And that is the game in a nutshell. The environments do vary ever so slightly, from sandy beaches to haunted grave sites and snowy landscapes, but the gameplay loop remains the same, leaving you feeling like you're just running around on a different texture. There are some challenging side missions and the occasional boss battles, but the majority of the game feels like the definition of monotony. In some ways, this game feels like it should have been released in the previous generation. There are elements of the game's semi-open world which is littered with collectibles that actually remind me quite a lot of the Spyro games released on the PlayStation 1. A weird comparison, I know, but there is something about this game's design that does feel slightly dated, even for a game in 2002. Visually, this game hasn't aged very well. I will give it some credit, the water does look good and has a nice realistic shimmer to it, and the character models are also okay for their time. The real eyesore with this game for me are some of the environments. Not only do they feel somewhat bland and empty, but the textures of some of the islands look like they've been stretched across the ground, and you can sometimes see the seams of where one texture ends and another begins. One bonus for this game, and arguably the best reason to play it, is the cutscenes. Not only does the animation look kind of creepy and jarring, but the voice acting... the voice acting is fantastic. Honestly, seeing more of these cutscenes makes it all worth it for me, and it was a genuine incentive for me to keep moving through the game. And I'm still unsure as to whether the game was actually taking itself seriously or not.
Then come with me. We'll pay this new governor a visit.
Me bones creak on cold mornings, lass. I'll have to have a think on it a bit.
Atmospheric music does feature throughout the game as you progress through your pirate adventure. However, it sounds more like something you'd hear waiting in line for a pirate ship ride at Alton Towers than a memorable and epic score. It is a struggle to know what to say about this game. While I see a lack of polish at every single turn, I can't deny that I did have fun, but maybe for the wrong reasons. The gameplay isn't challenging or satisfying, and it is certainly no technical marvel, but Legend of the Black Cat's cheesiness is instantly memorable, so it was a struggle to decide on a score. Is this game worth searching for? No. Is this game so bad it needs to be destroyed? No. It feels like a budget title in every sense of the word, but that does seem to add to the game's charm. If you're like me and take pleasure in laughable dialogue, and you happen to come across a copy for less than £1, give it a go and enjoy it, but just make sure you set your expectations accordingly.